practical is the who, what, how, and when of determining how to deal with your anger. Okay, I mean, so what do you do? I mean, so here's the questions. You want to ask, at who am I really angry? Myself, someone else, the situation, or God? Now this may sound simple, but I expressed my anger. I thought I was angry at my son for not, having his chores done, or my daughter for not making her bed, or my wife because she had the audacity to say I'm being unreasonable with the kids. That's not who I was angry at. And until you get clear on who you're angry at, you can't deal with it rightly and you can't heal. Becca, in her counseling, tells the story of a young woman who was date raped, been in counseling for a long time, and was not making progress. And she said, had a breakthrough in one of the sessions, and this young woman discovered that her anger's focus was really not so much on the perpetrator, but she was mad at herself. And she was taking on the guilt, which is not uncommon with rape victims. It was, why did I ever go out with that guy? I saw a little red flag. I mean, obviously, nothing. And so she was blaming herself, mad at herself. And it wasn't until she realized, you know what, I'm angry with me, that then she could say, now wait a second, are you responsible when people hold you down and do unmentionable things? No. See, until you understand who you're angry at, you have a hard time dealing with what are the real issues. And we believe a lot of lies. By the way, we do a series on spiritual warfare. If you think this isn't an arena where the enemy, he's a liar, he's a condemner, he's an accuser. In fact, the key passage is what? Be angry, yet don't sin. Don't let the sun go down on the anger. And why? Lest you give the devil a foothold. So a lot of these, when you have unresolved anger, there's all kind of Christians that never think there's demonic, satanic, powerful forces. He doesn't need to have things move in your house or scare you to death. If he has you believing a lie about condemnation and ruining your present relationships, I mean, why should he show you himself when he has you buffaloed now? And by the way, some of you are starting to deal with anger issues and starting to talk about things, and it gets really hard and really difficult and really threatening. I got news for you. There is huge spiritual opposition about you doing and obeying and listening to what we're talking about. It's a stronghold. So the first thing you need to find out is who are you angry at? I have a very, very close friend, godly young woman, known for years, and about every 6 months to 13 months, she has a complete meltdown. She's been single. She's now in her late 40s, and attractive, bright, all the things you would ever think. And she, gets depressed. It took about 5 years to realize, and for her to admit, she's mad at God. She's really mad at God. Why haven't you brought someone into my life? And she has some really warped views of God. And so she thinks God is punishing her. And she has a lot of things. But until she came to the point where she realized she wasn't mad at these guys who asked you out once, these guys that once you get sort of serious, back away. She wasn't mad that Christian guys seemed to be. She had her anger in all kind of different areas. She finally realized, I'm mad at God. And by the way, at least from the book of Job and from the Psalms, God doesn't seem to be too upset when people are honest and candid and angry with him in order to get to the heart of issues. He can handle it. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted. He's near to those who are crushed in spirit. He's near to those to come in truth. Isaiah, quoting God, says, call to me, present your cause, that you might be proved right. God longs more than anything else for us to be honest and come to him with the raw pain and the hurt that we have. So number one, as you go through this, you acknowledge your anger, you're backtracking, then you want to say, well, who am I mad at? Second, what should I do? Right? Okay, now I've discovered who I'm mad at. Well, it's my spouse, it's one of my kids, it's me, it's God. Well, what should I do? Express it directly or release it indirectly? Do I confront the situation or do I conceal it? Will my plans make matters worse or make them better? And this is where I'm going to ask my friend, Dr. Becca Johnson. She says it in 2 paragraphs because this is critical. What do you do when you realize, A, you're angry, and B, you're angry at someone? Do you directly go at it and deal with it? And when do you not? She writes, when we find ourselves in an unwanted situation with angry feelings, we basically have 2 choices. Do I express my feelings directly to the person, or do I release them indirectly through various activities? Dealing with it directly means choosing to confront the situation. We try and change it. We act rather than acquiesce. We take action and appropriately let the person involved know about our anger and its root emotions, what contributed to their existence, and what we would like to be different. It's best to express ourselves clearly without blaming or attacking. We let our anger be known, but in ways we previously discussed. I feel blank when you blank. I wish you would versus demand. We get it out wisely and carefully, never impulsively or without consideration of the consequences and the causalities. Dealing with our anger indirectly gives us more options. Sometimes it's best to accept things the way they are, conform, and not to share our anger with those involved, conceal. But it's important to make sure our motivation isn't from an uncomfortable situation. We choose this option not by default or out of hopelessness, but out of a calculated conclusion that it would be best not to stir the waters or rock the boat at this particular time in this particular situation. Wisdom sometimes demands that we choose not to provoke or reprove someone when past history or other circumstances dictate it to be an unwise practice. Sometimes we have to find a new job, do business with a different company, discontinue an unhealthy relationship. We choose not to confront, but to quit. We should consider this only after we've weighed all other options carefully and determined that letting go is the best course of action. Does it make sense? See, there's times where you work for a boss and he's making sexual advances. I feel uncomfortable when you make jokes like that. And they continue to make sexual advances, and you understand that your role in the company is of the kind that there may be a time there's someone you're to report this to, and you need to directly say this is the way it is and understand the consequences. There's other times where maybe it's a different situation and you realize no matter what you do, you're powerless. Your role in the company, your role in the relationship, you've said it 78 times, it's the 79th, nothing has changed, you're trying to reprove a mocker, and you realize, you know something, all it will do is inflame the problem. I've prayed about it, I'm willing, I'm not uncomfortable, I would do it, and you pray and God says, you know something, this is not one, don't go down this road again. How many times do you need to knock your head against that wall for that bump on your head to get bigger and bigger and more painful and realize, on this one, you know what, there was a time, what did Jesus say to some of the disciples? Get the dust off your feet, move on to the next town. You don't always have the ability, and sometimes it's not God's will to resolve everything with everyone. You do the best you can as far as it depends on you. And that's why, by the way, we have a Holy Spirit. He will show you, if you're willing and open, what to do in various situations. The third issue is not only the who or the what, but the how. How do I deal with the situation? Should I do it in person? Should I do it on the phone? Should I do it through a letter? Should I engage in sort of, she calls it an anger discharge activity. I call it working out. How do you know what to do? I would say the best way, if at all possible, is in person. It's the hardest way, but that's the best way because one, you can read the body language and, the goal is you speak the truth in love. I feel hurt. I feel disappointed. I felt used when, and you get to express your anger to a person when your motive is, I love them and I want to restore the relationship, not, this will make me feel better because I'm getting vengeance. The goal of most anger is vengeance. And so you need to forgive the person, right? I'm going to release you. That's what forgiveness is all about. I'm going to be merciful to you the way God has been merciful to me, but I'm not going to be a doormat. So I'm going to tell you, I feel this way when you do this, but I'm doing it Not because I can guarantee the result. It's because I love you, and you need to know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And I'm not going to sit on this and bury this and stuff this and pretend that things are okay and have an inauthentic relationship. And so in person is usually the best way. But sometimes, because of how the person might respond, you might say, well, gosh, I did that once, and that's how, when they rewired my jaw, right? Or I did that once, and it was, and so maybe a letter is the best way to go, okay? Or for some of you, I've been, pastoring just a little over 25 years, and we talk about stuff like this, and it's like the note we heard earlier. Since I've been a little girl, my dad's been dead 10 years, what I do. I encourage you to write a letter to a person that, whether they're dead or whether it would be totally inappropriate and you know the response, to write a very specific letter. I feel blank when you and because you, and you write it out and list it out and you get it out here. I remember a time where, the long story, I won't go into it, but a guy called me under the premise of something and was trying to trap me and recorded the conversation, trying to make me say something bad about someone else, and then never played it but told people I had said things. And, I was pretty young, I was like 38, and I was livid. I mean, I was just, I found out about, livid. I had anger fantasies. Like pretending terrible things happened to him and saying, "Thus says the Lord," And I was eaten up, and I couldn't sleep, and I was angry. And I remember eating lunch with a fellow pastor, a really godly guy, and he said, "You know what, Chip, you need to do? You need to write that guy a letter. You need to get it all out. You need to get it really straight." And he's a brother that really loves me. And so, man, I did. And I wrote it all out. He said, "Let me read that thing." And he read it all. He goes, "Wow." So the motivation for this letter was, well, man, this guy did this terrible stuff, and he needs to know. So the motivation is justice, right? And then I noticed that there's some little innuendo here, except it's not very innuendo. It's like you're really slamming this guy. Yeah, it's true. Well, okay, it's true, but so you really want to pay him back. I don't know if I'd call it that. That sounds too much like vengeance, and that sounds like something only God should do. And anyway, I wrote that letter. And he said, "Why don't you try rewriting it again when you feel like the goal of the letter would to restore his relationship to God and his relationship to you?" And it took me 3 or 4 days before I could get to where I was willing to do that. And I eventually did it. I wrote out a letter. And then he challenged me. He said, "You know what I encourage you to do? Why don't you take that letter, put it in an envelope, and put it in your briefcase? And why don't you sit on it for 30 days?" And I did. And all the venom, all the junk, all the injustice, and God began to speak to me. And then, in that particular case, that letter became just a little monument of, God, I'm going to trust my reputation to you. At the end of it, the core of my anger was not what he did. The core of my anger was I was zealous for my reputation. I was zealous for what people might think. And for me, it was a step of faith to say, I'm going to trust that to you, Lord. And I watched after years later, God took care of all of that. I never sent the letter. There's a time to send a letter. There's a time not to send the letter. For some of you, you write a letter and you have a good friend look at it and help you process. But there's some people in this room, I guarantee, that have 10, 20, 30, 40 years of pain and resentment that's buried toward parents or people or someone who walked out on you that is unresolved and has been a poison in your soul. And you need to sit down maybe this afternoon and write a 2 or 3 page letter of what they did, how you actually felt, how angry you really felt, the negative impact and consequences it's had on your life, and you get down to the end, and then by the grace of God, when you can say it and mean it, and I forgive you. And you may never need to send a letter. And make sure someone reads it a couple times before you ever send anything. But do you see the process? We need to figure out the who, the what, the how, and then finally the when. When should I deal with the situation? Should I do it now? Right now? Let's get this taken care of right now. Should I do it later? Or like in the case of that letter, should I do it never?